Hey guys, Necroxix. So it's been a long time since I've done any kind of Through the Eyes of Necroxix videos, but I thought this would be a good time. And I probably should have done it with something else I was doing, so I had to reinstall ESXi 6.5 Update 2 on my first server. I have two servers. Due to something seemingly getting corrupted, and I could not update from 6.5 to update 1 and update 2 the way I could on the second server. And I think the short lesson in that is if you virtualize your router, you may need to virtualize it on the other system as well, or have a physical router to use, because if it relies on an internet connection that's being provided through that hypervisor, it has to shut everything down and go into maintenance mode. And I think that created a lot of problems. And then when I was trying to configure my startups, the startup virtual machines, it wouldn't let me. And so something got corrupted in the process, and I think it was related to that. My goal for today is going to be trying to upgrade my vCenter server appliance, vCSA, from 6.5 to 6.7. I don't know if this is a good idea or not, so it'll be a learning experience for me for sure. I discovered that the newer ESXi 6.7 is no longer going to work on my servers. So I have two Dell R710s running. That's the, Dell PowerEdge R710. And mine are using the X5570 processors. People can still get them to work, the ESXi 6.7 to work on the 56XX processors, but not the 5500 ones that I have. So if I really wanted to try 6.7, I would need to upgrade the processors, but it's basically they are just deprecating old hardware. So those servers for now are going to remain on the 6.5 base with update 2. And something interesting for me is I updated using Dell's custom ISO for it. So my primary server, this .5, is 6.5 update 2, but you see it's Dell EMC, whereas the secondary server has a different image profile. It's the official ESXi install that was on that. So I have two different alternate configurations as a result. So it gives me some room to experiment with. If there's a problem with one and not the other, I learned something. So I want to approach this logically. So we have the vCenter server appliance right here. And this is what I'm going to try and upgrade. And before I do that, what I'm going to do is clone it to the other machine as a backup. So if it doesn't work, then I can just pull off the backup and pretend nothing ever happened. I'm just going to name this 190330. And we're going to put it on here. And this is something I do regularly with my vCSA. If I'm doing an update, I can clone it, and I clone it to the other computer, or sorry, the other server, so that if I broke it, and if it breaks, I can't access its web management interface, then I can always load the other one. And the cool thing is I can always turn it off on one server and turn it back up on the other server. So when I'm upgrading one server, it has to run the vCSA off of the other server. And that's how I accomplish that task. So for now, we're creating a backup specifically because it's going to be upgraded, hopefully. The only thing I have to change is the network adapter. I have these ephemeral deport groups for each server to prevent me from locking myself out as I mess with the distribution switch. So once I've initiated this, we can see the cloning stuff happening, and it'll take a little while. So why am I trying to upgrade to 6.7 on the vCSA? Well, I have a couple reasons. I want to upgrade to it because down the line I may add servers into my network or in my rack that will support it. And in order to use 6.7, you need vCSA at least at 6.7. It still can manage 6.5, but the 6.5 vCSA will not manage a host that's running on 6.7. So if I want to be more future-proof, at least I can get vCSA up to 6.7. And then the secondary benefit, at least what I'm hoping, is I'll be able to use their newer management interface. 6.5 has had a lot of issues with, well, the web GUI was problematic. The segregation between the fully functional Flash client and the partial support HTML5 was just a mess. Like, not everything was available in the faster HTML5, so I'm hoping that the 6.7 and the more fully featured HTML5 that they have will allow me to benefit from that as well. It may not. One concern I do have for sure is what will happen with my updating process. So what I mean is when I click on one of these servers, and they're mostly up to date now. It's non-compliant right now, but that's because they put out, I think, a new patch not long ago. So I have like a missing patch here and here. The thing is, if I'm running on 6.7 on vCSA, is that going to try to give me upgrades for 6.7? Because I know 6.7 will not work on my servers, so that's something I need to be thinking about. Or will it actually know that the servers are not going to be supported and the host will not, or rather the management will not offer me to update them? We're going to find out. While this copy's over, I will go and twiddle my thumbs. Okay, so that took a long time to clone, but now I've got my vCSA that I'm actively running backed up right over here, and I probably should have renamed it so that I know what I'm doing. So we'll say pre 6.7 upgrade. So if anything goes wrong and it doesn't work, I can just come back and use that. So we will try the UI installer for Windows. Where's the exe? Right here. So this is what their vCenter Server Appliance Installer looks like. I can install a new appliance. No. Upgrade an existing. That's probably the one. Migrate from an existing vCenter. So I think if you had like the Windows version instead of the virtual machine version, you could migrate it from Windows into this. If I understand correctly, they've done away with the Windows version in favor of having to run it as a standalone virtual machine, which is how I've been using it myself. So let's go ahead and hit upgrade. This allows us to upgrade from 6.0 and 6.5, that's the one we're on, to 6.7. I accept. So the appliance IP should be this. Connect to source. Okay. So now it's going to need my password as well as the root password. So the source appliance is the actual vCSA. So I have it on my .3 IP. I gave it my passwords, and then it's running on the .6 server right now, and then I had to provide my root username and password. Then when I hit next, I have a certificate warning. I'm going to hit yes. And now it needs the appliance deployment target. Specify the appliance deployment target settings. This is the ESXi host or vCenter server instance on which the appliance will be deployed. So if it's going to be on the same host, then I should be using that, I think. Let's see if that works. Accept the certificate. So the virtual machine name will be vCSA, I don't know. Setting a root password. That should work. Now we've got an option of doing the deployment size and all that stuff. And I'm just going to go with the default minimum. My usage case does not have an entire, enterprise running on things, so the tiny allocation would be just fine. That'll use 2 vCPUs, 10 gigs of RAM, which is still a lot for me. Like, I don't like the vCA approach, although it makes sense why it exists for enterprise use. But we're just going to keep all this default. Hit next. It's going to go into the data store on that same server. Do I want to enable thin disk mode? Actually, no, let's change that. I'm going to enable thin disk mode. That should help with the backup speed, I think, whenever I'm cloning to the other system, so that if I'm not if the disks themselves are not maxed out to the brim, then it doesn't have to copy as much data over every time I do a cloning. So let's hit next. Now the next thing is going to be the network settings. And this I need to double check. So for this particular VM, we are using which network? Okay, so we're using the ephemeral port group. So I'm going to make sure to use that as well here. I made that originally because I was messing with the VD switch rather, and I misconfigured something and completely locked myself out from being able to access the management as a result, and I had to go through all this crazy stuff at one point in the time. So it needs a temporary IP address. Okay, so that should all check out. I don't know if I need to have it a different IP address from what I normally use, but either way it should be configurable to go back. In fact, let's see what happens if I just tell it to go to .3 instead. That's already in use. Okay, so virtual machine with the same IP exists in the deployment. This will cause an error in deployment unless you isolate the network. Okay, so we did not isolate the network, so it really does need a different IP. And it is going to go back to .3 from the looks of it. And it'll only temporarily use the .33. So I'm going to hit finish. And I don't know how long this will take. I would imagine it would take a reasonably long length of time. Okay, so upgrade stage 1 is complete. You have successfully deployed the vCenter server with an embedded platform service controller. Proceed to stage 2. All right. Continue. If you exit, you can continue with the appliance setup at any time by logging into the server appliance management interface, so that temporary IP address is going to be available at this IP if we were to stop and resume later, which we're not going to do. We're going to just continue along right now. So this is stage 2. It's a 2-stage process. This first part's been done, so let us do stage 2. I would imagine if everything blows up, it would be during stage 2. So that pre-upgrade check took a long time. It's giving me multiple different warnings. The host is managed by vCenter. I don't have to worry about that because I have my backup. I can do whatever I need. Files that cannot be used with the Update Manager 6.7 will not be copied from the source. Includes the VM Guest OS patch baselines, host upgrades, and ESXi or ESX 5.5 and lower host patches. I don't have to worry about running anything like earlier than 6.5, so there should be no issues. So we're just going to hit close. And while I'm at it, one of the warnings said that it had less cores than what was configured on the previous installation. So I think at some point I bumped this up to 4 CPUs manually. Now, I don't really have much to say about this stuff. I just know you want to do the third checkbox. Sizes are almost identical, and this will include historical data for events, tasks, and the metrics for performance. So that sounds pretty good to me. I don't want to join your experience improvement. Alright, so review the settings. Let's go ahead and do that. That'll be my IP. Currently, that's the IP. It's version 6.5. It's going to have a temporary IP, and then once it's done upgrading, it will go back to the previous one that we wanted, and then we'll be on 6.7 for the appliance. I have backed up the source and all the required data we have. Let's go ahead and hit finish. Now the source vCenter will be shut down once the network configuration is enabled. Press OK to continue. So I imagine this is where things will really go crazy if they don't work. So while it does that, I'll go do other things, and then we'll come back when it's done, see what's going on. So I was taking a look while this is doing its installation still. I opened up my VMware, and looking at vCSA, the system is already booted up into the temporary IP address. This screen looks a little different. Normally, it's just a little command prompt. Okay, so that took a pretty long time. And now I've got these messages. Auto deploy stuff. vSphere 6.7 disables TLS 1.0 and 1.0 protocols for security. That is fine. We don't rely on that. Reconfigurator tool is in a location in the user library, whatever, doesn't matter. Cool. So from the looks of it, it copied the data, it started the services, it imported and did all that stuff, and it's all done. Even has this particular appliance getting started page. So the next question is, does it actually work? So I recently upgraded, well, today actually, but I haven't rebooted, so the keyboard drivers have not been fully initialized, but I upgraded my workstation, my VM workstation to 15.0 or maybe 0.1 or whatever. And I don't know what's new with it, but I can see vCSA is running still, and this is a different visual screen than it used to be. And we can see up here it's version 6.7.0 dot blah blah. It's using 2 cores and 10 gigs of memory. So it looks as if it's running, and it should be running now for a little while. One of the things that I do want to note is whenever I boot this thing up, it boots up to its normal screen pretty fast, and then I have to wait another 5-10 minutes before the web interface will actually work. And I don't know if it's going to be better now or not. Let's see if this works. Well, looky, interesting. The web interface appears to work. Before I dive into that, I kind of wanted to log into the management interface as well. I don't know what the exact IP is. This is my administration machine that has like tons of different web GUIs and things. So this is where I normally work on this system, and it looks like that's the Flash version. But let's see what happens with this. Okay, so on the administration system, I can see that the VM appliance management page is also loading. So it looks different as well. Let's go ahead and log in and have a look-see at what's in here. I am curious. So we have a host name. I don't really care what it's called. All my health checks out. It's running. Monitor. So typically whenever I do upgrading through this thing first, and then through the actual VMware's vCSA stuff. I can upgrade the hosts and everything. So I can see my SSH is disabled, which is good. DNS server is configured correctly. Firewall. So there's now a firewall on this. Not sure why I would need that. There's a services tab. So it seems like there's more features than before, from what I remember. We got the updates. Well, I don't think I'm going to try and update it yet. I will take a look at what it looks like. We have default repository, custom, check for updates automatically. I'm going to not do it automatically. I want to be able to do it manually so that I can do backup procedures before I do it, because in the past I've had many issues where I would update this, and when I reboot the appliance, I don't get access to the web browser, the web GUI. It just doesn't work for me, and then you just scramble around. I don't know what to do. So it's CROM plus URL. There we go. So I guess we are already up to date. This must be the latest version. What else we got? Administration, password expiration settings. That was another thing that was funny when I was doing some updates and reconfiguring. The default in 6.5 at least, there was a password expiration of 365 days. And there was a bug in the exact version I had that wasn't patched. And as a result, the updates weren't working, and I had to go into the shell and reset the password and then disable this feature so it never happened again. We get system logs and what looks like a backup feature. I don't know where it backs it up to. Protocol supported for backups: FTPS, HTTPS, SEP, FTP. I wonder if it's for the configuration or if it's the entire system or the entire appliance. But whatever, we are good. I can reboot and all that stuff here. Let's go back to the regular main management system. We now have HTML5 and Flex. I know nothing of Flex, so I don't know what to say. And I'm willing to bet if it's in the convention of how they've been doing 6.5, one of these two is feature complete and the other one's broken and garbage. So let's do the HTML5 interface, which looks basically the same as the old one. So it took a long time for it to log in. I don't know if it's still performing tasks or what. The server that it's currently running on only has one spinning drive, and so disk speed is very limited, and I know vCSA tends to be extremely heavy on input-output to the disk. So this vSphere client looks completely different from what I am used to. Okay, we got home. Okay, so this looks more normal. And then we have our hosts and our clusters. So here's the Necroxix data center. And we can already see that there's a warning. Registration/unregistration of third-party input-output filter storage providers fails on a host. I will have to look into that because that sounds bad. But it looks as if everything is here. We can manage everything like we normally would. For me anyways, the complicated part has always been messing with the networking portion of vSphere or VMware. It takes a lot of clicking around in different places to access the different things I need to access. So there's only one thing I want to check, and that's going to be the updates. I want to know if I run it to check for updates, will it attempt to upgrade these servers to 6.7? Because that's something I do not have the freedom for. These two servers are essentially in production. Like, I depend on this stuff to work, and I don't have the flexibility of trying an update, it not working, and everything blows up. So 2 hosts with 6.5.0. So hopefully it will not look past 6.5.0 on these hosts. So let's go ahead and host updates. Where do I actually check for the updates? We got 6 patch downloads. Last download 6 hours ago. Next scheduled download in 17 hours. So these, I think, were already pre-existing, and you can see they're for version 6.0. So the good news is it looks like it is not listing updates for anything that shouldn't be there. Check the compliance. So right now it's just doing a scan on the first server to see its compliance. That should be in relation to whatever the update manager has pulled from the repository. So we can see we have 1 non-compliant baseline, 2 patches, which are 2 critical and 2 security. I will definitely want to update that. There's a pre-check remediation, which seems to be new. A pre-check looks for problems that may prevent remediation from succeeding. That sounds useful. The system actions. Update manager will automatically perform these to ensure successful remediation. You must perform these actions to unblock remediation. Let's go ahead and give a pre-check. Let's see what this looks like. Let's run the pre-check. No cluster issues found. Didn't really find much of anything, so no user actions required, no system actions will be performed. I guess that's good. If I click on my first server, we can see build 119, whatever. Is it going to be the same here? Yes, it is. But it looks like otherwise we have succeeded. It's not trying to update the host to a later version. So that means if they make a 6.5 update 3 or something like that, I don't know if they're still going to be doing updates, then it'll be available, but it won't try to go to 6.7, which is great. If I go to my networks thing, there are my networking ports. I have the one switch. And then from here, I should be able to manage it as necessary. Configure, monitor. I don't know if I have access to that tree view anymore. They may have changed the whole process, but this should be okay. But overall, I think I'm satisfied. I didn't think this was even going to work, but it did. So we have upgraded the vCSA to 6.7. So I can still continue to manage these two servers that'll remain on 6.5 indefinitely. And when I add more servers that are like more modern, I can use 6.7, and that'll also be managed through the same controller. And I imagine I should be able to still clone between the servers and things like that. That'll work out for me in my particular workflow. So I know it's been a long time since I've done any of these types of videos of me showcasing what's going on through the eyes of Necroxix. But I'm hoping I can start getting back into it again a little bit, because I have a lot of shenanigans, and hopefully within the next year or so I should have access to more servers and more things I need to or want to play around with that I can document and record for entertainment purposes, maybe for learning purposes. Take out of it what you want. I know that if I didn't have just these two servers that I rely on, there's already a few things I want to play with that I currently can't, but with a third server in the mix, I would. I want to try out Proxmox, Hyper-V, and XCPNG as alternative hypervisors, just to try out, see how they perform. Are they easier to work with? Do they run Windows servers better? Are they more stable, less stable? I'm mostly married to ESXi. I have licenses for them, and when it works, it is solid. And these Dell PowerEdge R710s have been flawless. I have a future networking project that I will also try and document. It's going to be a nice clusterfuck of spaghetti madness, I'm sure. I'll deal with it when that happens. But as I am now, everything looks fine and dandy. I have to investigate what this error is exactly. Okay, so I Googled up the error that we were getting, and it looks like the cause is transient connectivity between the host and the vCenter server being provisioned. So you could safely click the reset to green icon or link and get rid of that. So it's not a sign of a problem with my hardware or any problems with configuration or corruption of data. That is good to know. I know another thing that I'm planning on doing is consolidating down my link aggregation groups, because I have like 7 network ports going into a single link aggregation group for extra redundancy and throughput, but very, very unnecessary for my purposes. And in the future, when I need to integrate my systems along with other systems into a central, larger network, I don't need that many ports being used on any one server. So that'll be another thing to do. I am shocked at how smoothly that went. It took a long time, but it worked, and all is well, seemingly. I now have access to their newer, hopefully more feature-complete interface with Html5.